So as I was just saying there, we've prepared a couple of questions just to get the kind of conversation flowing, as it were. Some of these questions we've probably already touched on as well, but the main purpose of it is to get each of the speakers' own individual experiences and industries and sectors they're coming from to really kind of delve into some of these kind of key points. So if I maybe just start it off with the first question, really from your own individual experiences and your own individual sectors, what advice would you give any organisation that is potentially looking to delve into B2B e-commerce for the first time, or indeed perhaps they're looking at a change in strategy, perhaps they're looking at a new ERP or a new e-commerce platform? It's time to kind of review where they currently are. Just from each an individual kind of perspectives, what perhaps could you share to the floor? Perhaps I'll start with Marc actually on that.
Sure.
From a platform perspective.
I'll have to try and remember the 4 last points of my presentation. Add them in there, but I think the main one I think that kept on coming up is to focus on the customer, and I do think that's absolutely a crucial one. So focus on the customer. I think the integration piece we've talked about a good bit as well. Don't forget that it's where projects fail. It's where if you don't have the right partner for that, that's where things get difficult. Yeah, and then don't underestimate the change management or the digital transformation piece as well. I sell software, but there's a lot more than selling software. There's a lot more than buying software to get this done. So don't underestimate that part.
Absolutely. Paul, maybe yourself, you take us back to
I suppose
days, the journey.
Overall, you need buy-in. So you've got to get I suppose like our chief digital officer Michael, and I think this is where he had struggled for a couple of years, was getting that buy-in initially from the business, and then once you get it, I think definitely in our world, because we have SAP as our ERP system, your integration piece and the considerations of that, I would say we got it fairly right. We've made some improvements, but even now, like when we're considering moving to Magento 2, like we're already considering, like you just mentioned, like a PIM, because like SAP, for example, like it has very limited information about products, and you have a 40 character limit on product descriptions, and like we sell products where ideally we want to have a sub description or information about a product that could be 400 characters. So a PIM becomes like a real necessity then. Like we want to, in terms of catalogs, we want to start exposing things like recommended selling prices, margin to the customer. So this whole sort of subsection of additional information that it will be really beneficial to the customer. But again, and then I suppose that harks back to, when you're making these decisions, like what does your customer need? Like there's certain things we know now that our customer needs that is really triggering our whole sort of consideration of a PIM. But it takes time as well. Like you definitely need to understand that. Like what does your customer need? That's a huge piece of what you actually decide to build, even from an architecture and technical perspective.
I think that buy-in point you raise is absolutely key, and if I could maybe just bring in Bharat from an agency and SI system integrator perspective, I know from our side, getting that kind of the business goals and the buy-in absolutely key. Maybe you want to share some thoughts.
Couldn't agree on that. So obviously customer experience of getting and understanding customer is obviously the key. Platform that has integration capability and what is your own capability is very, very important. But one of the bigger challenge, which we just keep hitting a lot of time, is bigger the companies, bigger the cultural challenges, these silos of departments, marketing doesn't talk to the sales, or they have their own ownership, and sometimes they might not be aligned with the digital capability, as if the digital marketing capability could be either doesn't exist or exists somewhere far away from the marketing department. So breaking all of that can only happen when there is a very strong management commitment. And not only that, on top of it, there has to be resource committed. This thing needs to be taken almost you're opening another service or a store, and that needs commitment and management and time. So assigning the right adequate resources and give them that focus to achieve that, that is, I think, the key, which sometimes we miss out. You'll get the budget, but you might not have the people or personnel to drive it to the right period.
Ian, from your side?
Yeah, I think I agree with all of those points. Something we'd always encourage when organisations are looking at a large investment in a project like this is looking at the benefits that you're going to achieve. You know, it's feeding into the business case really. So okay, you've absolutely got to start at what does the customer need, but what's that going to bring for you? Is it? There was a question about costs and revenue earlier. Like there's lots of areas where benefits might exist, and they're different for every organisation. So is it, you know, is it growth in sales? Is it access to a new market or a new channel? Is it a cost reduction through the transaction costs? You know, so there's lots of things. Or it might be something strategic. It might be you've got to do it to protect your market share. It might be just a risk of burning platforms that you've got today. So like there's any number of benefits, and you just need to look at those and articulate them well and quantify them if at all possible. And then you can link that to the requirements that you've got. You know, that should drive functional requirements and so on, and that should all help to build the buy-in. You know, it'll back up the budget, and even when you get into the change management, if you can articulate clearly why we're doing this project, people are much more receptive to taking on that change, I think.
Absolutely. So just following on from that question, and again it's a bit of a theme that's been sort of reoccurring throughout the morning, but just looking at some of the kind of core challenges in each of your own individual experiences that an organisation may have had from the start, or indeed is currently undergoing as they revise and renew their strategy. We talk a lot about, you know, technical challenges, whether that be legacy systems, IT systems that maybe Ian you've talked about just recently there, or indeed organisational challenges from a cultural perspective internally, the buy-in as Paul said, and indeed customer onboarding. We talk a lot about self-serve and making sure the customers, you know, change that kind of mindset from their current way of buying or procuring to a new self-serve e-procurement online version. And indeed marketing, making sure the investment, we get the ROI from it as an organisation. So maybe just on those kind of 4 pillars of technical organisation, customer onboarding and indeed marketing, perhaps if you could share any of your own insights for any organisation here and business, just how they can maybe sort of face those challenges in the journey ahead. Maybe Bharat, I'll start with you in this one.
So, in my observation, technical challenges, just to start with, there is a lot of legacy system. The bigger the company, older the company, the bigger, more legacy system. So, when you're starting the journey, and suddenly you're talking about cloud-based interface, and you know, connecting them with these new modern shiny tools, people could still be using Windows and God knows, you know, XP's and very low system. So I think there needs to be a realism when we are starting this journey. We need to really understand that where the customers are. If they are sitting somewhere down in the countryside in a DIY sector client and providing those fulfillment, and they're using these really old CRT monitors, and if you design a beautiful, you know, user interface with lots of images and photos, it's not going to work. A connectivity, the monitor. So we need to, again, it goes back to the client.
Yeah.
Expectation needs to be defined. Current capability of your users and how soon could that be changed, or what's the reality? We need to have that pragmatic decision of how far you want to push when you're making a solution out of it. And then obviously integration with things like ERP, order management system, fulfillment system, that needs to be analyzed. You could have an absolutely beautiful e-commerce system solution, but if you don't have the inventory and the pricing and those things not coming out right, it's never going to work. You know, what goes in, what goes out. So those challenges are quite huge, and that could either slow you down, or your system might not be very successful when you're rolling it out. It'll frustrate the end user. So that's the technical part, in my opinion. Marketing I leave to the experts on the business side, but on the user adoption point, or rolling it out to your end customer, one of the observations I've kind of noticed is if you go to your end user or your client, your business client, and if you tell them at the end that this is new shiny box and go and play with it, they don't like it. But if you involve them as an early adopter and like maybe having a more agile process of saying, look, we would like your opinion, would you like to come user testing with us, would you like to play with this, and we'll keep working with you and become an early adopter. Those are the people, they then become your advocates, and you can actually use those people to actually roll out to their peers, other customers. And I found that strategy worked really, really well. So if you identify a few core end users, work with them at early stages, almost make them the advocate, and empower them to make decisions and influence the solution. In the long run, it makes your life a lot easier. So that's kind of one of the takeaway we got.
Paul, I'll maybe come to you on the customer onboarding. You touched on it, and I know it's a absolutely kind of critical part of the UniPhar success story and the journey, but just getting that mindset shift from, a procurement perspective in your space, maybe share some further thoughts.
When we launched the web, the first week, one of the comments was, "What gobshite changed the platform?" And I suppose we've had this massive journey like in that period of time. But it's really, really important, and I think it's something that UniPhar as a business probably underestimated, like just how much is involved in actually bringing your customer on that journey.
Yeah.
And I suppose where we've had the success now is, and it is by talking to them. It's fundamentally understanding what they really require, and you'd be amazed when you start to deliver on what they require. And obviously there's a compatibility there that needs to make sense for you as a business as well. But so when you get that and you get those wins, then it's amazing how it changes. And you see, and then obviously ultimately that ends up in sales and engagement and things like that. But it's very interesting, even like the customer mindset. So we've been on this journey for 3 to 4 years now, and we've only made a decision to do B2C.
Yeah.
But the real sell for B2C e-commerce was to our customers. So it was to our 78 owner-operated stores within Life, and to our 104 stores in the All Care franchise, 60 of which we own, but they're still operated, and 40 odd franchisees there. So actually doing a really good discovery piece around that, and actually going out and talking to those customers to get them on board. You will be amazed, like when we talk to them about like click and collect, omni-channel strategy, how we're going to drive customers into your store. Like the reaction ranges from brilliant to I don't want that. I don't want that. And it's hard for you. I find it hard to get your head around this. I'm going to drive customers into your store, and you're saying you don't want that. But that's the reality. And it's better to be forewarned and understand that up front in advance. So we probably spend, we've just finished our design phase. We're in sprint 1 of dev. But we spent like a good 6 months in this last year. But this was the fundamental sort of piece of this to get that buy-in, to get to the point where we now know that we've
discovery.
90% of Life are on board and they're in. We're a little bit behind on the All Care piece and some of the franchisees still too. But really interesting discussions. But again, by doing really good discovery, showing them what we're doing, how we're going to go about the solution, how we're going to target customers, what our omni-channel strategy is going to be, what our end design strategy is going to be, that helps sort of break down that negativity, and then you get people on board. But if you can imagine launching and not doing that piece, and people turn up in store and having a bad experience, and it can all unravel very quickly.
Marc, maybe from your side, and Magento, Adobe, there's obviously a lot going on there, and working with organisations and businesses, looking at those 4 pillars. Anything you would add to that?
Yeah, I would say I think what Paul just said is the and that's the outward-facing piece of that, right? So how do you get your customers to adapt, and using a online ordering platform instead of calling the sales rep that they've always called, or calling and I think that's where maybe the piece I wanted to add is you got to convince that sales rep as well. So you got to convince the customer to use the site, but you also got to convince the sales rep to push the site, right? So I think that's the challenges that we often see, that there's a lot of internal politics, and there's a lot of projects that mightn't go ahead, or where we might be relatively far down the sales cycle where we haven't talked to this department. Usually IT is usually relatively on board. They easy enough to work with, and sometimes even the driver of these projects. Obviously, does e-commerce as a department, they're always on board with this as well. That's what they do. But when you get to other departments, it can be a little bit more difficult to convince the rest of the organisation that this is a journey worth going on. And I think you talked about that before as well. Yeah. So I think that would be the challenge I would highlight. Is convincing the customer is one, and then internal is the other one. And if you can't convince internally that it's the way to go, it can be difficult to convince your customers. So.
Ian, you showed a lot of customers you've worked with in the past in your presentation. Are there any challenges you can share?
Yeah, I maybe talk to the organisation one and a little bit to the customer onboarding. I think change management, which you mentioned, is absolutely critical to these projects. Sometimes people think of it as a kind of a woolly thing, but it's not. It needs to be a real role that somebody has responsibility for on these projects. Like on ERP projects, a lot of the change is it's internal stakeholders that you're oftentimes the majority that you're dealing with. Obviously, when in an e-commerce sphere, there's external stakeholders that need to be brought along as well in your customers. So I think that there are real activities around how you engage with those, mapping out exactly what the changes are, figuring out what that means from a training point of view, training needs analysis, and right down to delivering that and rolling it out. And it may be that you're phasing how you roll it out, and just kind of managing and listening to what you're getting back at each stage along the way, and adjusting course then as you need to.
Absolutely. I've got a couple of remaining questions, then I'll open it up to the floor. But just moving on, we've talked a lot and heard from the speakers about the potential, if you will, of B2B online revenue and all the kind of financial kind of rewards, etc. Paul's touched on it as well, but perhaps we could just delve a little bit into some of the additional kind of KPIs that an investment in B2B e-commerce provides. Ultimately a platform for a whole business and that sort of holistic kind of perspective of everything. And when we're reporting to our relevant boards, etc., what's the additional kind of ROI rather than just pure kind of online revenue, if you will? So maybe what other KPIs should we be considering when we're looking at B2B e-commerce and ultimately B2C as well? Bharat, maybe I'll start with yourself there.
Yeah, there's the two, other than online revenue and sales itself, the kind of two prominent area we kind of talk a lot to our clients are, one is about the self-service area. So the self-service area is where you can actually have anything right from product specification document, especially for B2B, product specifications are very important. So having those data sheets, fact sheets, detailed product, how do you do it, implementation in DIY sector, that kind of information is huge. And if it's not there online, they would be calling your support, your customer support number, or they would be struggling on that. And what I found is one of the big KPIs now is in the self-service area is amount of downloads. So if users are going, or business users are going on a regular basis, and if they're downloading those fact sheet data sheets, they see as a point of success, because either your clients are interested, they're collecting the data on a regular basis, or they're actually they're saving you money by not calling you on phone or requesting those things on email. And actually, in one of the examples we have is self-service area could go all as far as managing things like invoices and credit control related information. So you're sending them monthly statements, people are downloading invoices and all of that. That could also save a huge amount of revenue and work overhead for the kind of HQ point of view. And that has been one of the KPI, which actually we stumbled upon, but it was actually a huge gain we realized, and now we proactively advise all of the clients to really consider those things.
Thank you.
Marc.
Marc.
Sorry, can I just ask about
Sure.
the security element of that? So obviously the download, say, type of data of the product spec,
Yeah.
be completely different than someone who might have bespoke pricing and the downloading financials. So I presume there's another gateway there or another
Yeah.
tier.
So you could literally have two-phase authentications, and you could have like a separate area where you have these sensitive information, and you could bind that with, Magento comes with a very strong encrypted security and protocols anyway, but you could, on top of that, there could be designated area you could build, which is two-phase authentication, and it's only for specific users to do it. So yeah, there's mechanics to do it.
Yeah.
Marc,
Yeah.
not to put you in the spot with the platform, but we all know Magento is a global leader in commerce, and obviously with joining Adobe, bringing the whole content and commerce together, and that experience, commerce as we know. But maybe just share with the audience some of the additional kind of benefits the platform provides. Obviously, we've got the sales side fairly kind of well covered, but we know it comes with an absolute suite of additional benefits, as it were, to
Sure.
benefit the whole organisation.
Purely looking at Magento as a platform, I think I hate going into feature comparisons because first of all it's pretty boring. but also everybody kind of does relatively the same thing. You know, there's some things somebody is better, other things that somebody else is better. So in terms of features, you know, it's all there, it's all great. I think where we come in really with a big competitive advantage it's two elements. One is the very clear ecosystem. It includes you guys and hundreds of other partners, you know, across the world, and just the sheer amount of knowledge that's built up around the ecosystem. And what I really love about that is that the amount of partners we had really meant that they've carved out little niches for themselves. So you guys have a very clear niche in B2B, but then we've partners. We've got one partner in Germany particularly that really focused in on the airport industry. They don't do anything else, and if you want to do airports and e-commerce, you go to them. So that's really good for our customers because they'll know they'll have the right partner for the right job.
Yeah.
So that's one, and the other one really is the openness of the platform. So, you know, we talk integration, we talk the speed of integration, the cost of integration. So it being an open source platform, having a huge amount of APIs and capabilities to connect, and having been built with that best in class mindset. You know, we know that e-commerce can't run by itself, an e-commerce platform can't run by itself. So it's designed and built to be integrated. Yeah.
And Paul, from your side, we heard it earlier, but certainly the ROI speaks for itself. It's not just pure net sales. It's obviously a whole raft of other cost efficiencies, business improvements that's got buy-in across your organisation.
Yeah, so we track, so for KPIs, and we constantly track everything on ourselves there, so downloads particularly, like invoices, statements, credits, and we've seen that going upwards, like it's probably double what it was initially. On the revenue side, obviously we track sales, but we're quite interested in as well, even in off e-commerce metrics, then to say like, right, well now, what's our telesale metrics now with the impact of e-commerce, and then sort of building that sort of bigger story into for internal consumption, like at our border management and places like that. And that's what I suppose was when it was sort of about how do you build that credibility, like, and that's really, it's a story we need to build. You know, like we're talking about, like we'll have to do another business case now for our Magento 2 migration. So the initial was, do we go to Magento 2, do we go to SAP Hybris? We've made a decision to go with Magento 2. So now we have to do a business case. So that'll be a very, very detailed business case again as to what that is. So having those types of metrics and that sort of like built over that sort of period of 2.5, 3 years now, it's really, really important.
It'll be interesting from a B2C perspective because it shouldn't be seen as a threat. It should be a sales assisting tool to drive virtual footfall hopefully as well.
Like, well, I suppose it goes back. I was just saying earlier as well. Like it's sort of back to the start, and my philosophy is going to be the same now. It's like it's build a really good product. What's 3 or 4 quick wins we can get, and then we build from there. But like I think there's a huge opportunity for even the insights and learnings we get from B2C, and then what do we bring from there back into play B2B side. I know like what Laura was talking about earlier on in terms of the UX and all.
Yeah.
Like, you know, we're scratching the surface of that B2B. There's a lot more we can do there, and we're having like commercially we're having like really good conversations with big brands now. So now we need to build out a solution that's sort of where we can house those brands. Yeah. Really go after it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I'll add to that, which is quite interesting. Sometimes the things you can measure are quite counterintuitive. So we work quite a bit with obviously omni-channel customers. What we find there is that actually returns, and you mentioned virtual footfall.
Yes.
But physical footfall is something we can definitely impact as well, and funnily enough, through returns. So what we see a lot is customers buying online, returning in store. And if you go and bringing kind of a lot of points in there, but that change management piece, so convincing staff in store to accept returns, they'll look at you and say, "Are you crazy? Why the hell would I do that?" So, you know, that's work for me. I don't get commission on that, but they'll buy something in the store, right? You return, if that's a drill or if that's a pair of shoes, it really doesn't matter. They'll come into the store. Now you have them in your store. Now whatever you do with your normal footfall, you know, they might take a different drill and buy an additional tool, or they might, you know, take the right pair of shoes and buy an additional item. And that stuff you can measure and track really well, because now that's purely the traffic you've generated to return. So it might be the best traffic, but it's good traffic still. So stuff like that you can measure quite easily, and even in strange places like returns in store is something you can.
The endless lines Paul mentioned earlier on as well.
Exactly.
From your side, Ian, from an ERP, single source of truth, I mean, for reporting and KPI.
Yeah, well, I generally bring it back to the benefits point at the start, you know. If you can identify and quantify those at the start, it's about measuring them. Let those be the KPIs initially anyway. And it's surprising how often that's lost. You know, people start out with a good intentions, even a good direction why they're doing the project, but then they stop measuring it afterwards. So it's important to do that. And I think it's interesting listening to Paul. I think just the level of granularity that you're getting later on, and maybe as you're moving to a second phase like that, that there's almost like a balanced scorecard of how the different more detailed and technical metrics might build up to influence the original business case metrics, which
yeah, because it's a fundamental part of our business case for Magento too. So it's like what worked in our original project,
yeah,
keep it, throw out what didn't work, and then layer on what we think will improve it again.
yeah.
You know?
Okay, my last question, and we've already touched on it, and it's really following on from Laura's presentation. It's really just to kind of, you know, explore and just get your thoughts from each of your own individual perspectives. So what can B2B organisations effectively learn from the B2C e-commerce environment and systems, if you will? So either from a UX and UI design perspective that Laura's touched on, or just knowing the customer. So just any kind of finishing, closing thoughts on how B2C can influence the B2B world as well from your own side.
I'll say that. Yeah, so for us, definitely it'd be around design.
Okay.
So it's very interesting the conversations we've had with brands like Clarence and so big skincare brands and who would be reluctant to give you their products for even for a B2C channel, and when they see what we're doing now, they're very interested, and they're saying, and how can you represent that back now for us on B2B?
Yeah.
So we see it just now coming out of our B2C project that's in train. We see huge opportunities now coming back into the B2B side, and that's definitely a piece where, like I was just talking to Laura about it earlier on as well. Like we're going to really now do a lot of discovery and a lot of time and effort into our whole sort of UX and design piece, which we would have paid very, like our initial launch was very little sort of time and effort went into that. We've done a couple of mini projects since then, but this time fundamentally, my recommendation as part of the business case would be that it needs to be a key piece of what we do.
Especially to attract those brands. Right.
I think for me it's the personalization. So B2C industry has been great about identifying who the end user is and personalizing them with the right content. The way B2B is looking, and you can literally see the demand now if you're talking to a food distribution company, and if your client is specialized, let's say Indian food sector or halal food, or they're doing Italian, they have a very specific need. And if you're slapping them with, food catalog items of 300 of everything, they don't like it. So the need now is about B2B people is when they go online, they just want to know what is relevant to them. And personalization is the key for me going forward, designing the right system. And Magento, with the new release coming, I think it has some absolutely brilliant features that would save a lot of life and effort for people like us. So I'm quite excited about that.
Segmentation.
Yeah.
I guess it's possibly more demanding. Laura talked about we're all consumers when we're not at work, so I think it's coming back to that listening to the customer thing. In B2B maybe many times you've got a relationship with the customer anyway that you can influence in ways outside of just through the channel, which maybe is harder in B2C. So it's maybe taking that responsiveness and focus that B2C has to have. B2B does too, but yeah.
From an ERP perspective, there must be, you'll be serving kind of almost like two masters. B2C customers will want a lot of merchandising information, and that will obviously influence conversion rate and reducing bounce rates on product details pages. Likewise, we know B2B customers, especially in trades circles, they've got huge product specs and everything, and perhaps that's feeding in from the ERP. So must be very, very
potentially
success there.
It brings different kind of challenges just in terms of data volumes and so on. Like all of those things about scalability and data volumes in a B2C world potentially are exacerbated or are more in focus.
Marc, anything from a B2C perspective into
I guess, yeah, what B2B can learn from B2C is definitely, what we said, customer experience, design. But I would turn that the other way around as well. I think there's a lot of things B2B does a lot better than B2C. I mean, I would love to have 11 deliveries a week to my house. It'd be great. I don't know. If we can get that done, you call any, you call, I don't know, Vodafone or Aircom, and our Vodafone account here in Adobe, when I call with that number, I have somebody on the phone in 20 seconds.
Yeah.
If I call their pay-as-you-go line, it's not 20 seconds. So I don't think it's definitely not all bad. I think there's really things B2B does way better.
Sure.
And I think it's how do we take that experience and not break it, right? Because we don't want to go down a route where suddenly you're waiting 20 minutes for somebody to pick up because we've gotten rid of the customer service staff. That's not the way we're trying to go, and I think that's one of the risks here. So let's make sure we keep the things that B2B is really good at, and we keep them being good, and yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I'll open it up to the floor. Any questions for the panel?
A question just in terms of carrot and stick. All our banks have done it. You get a letter one day and say, right, you're no longer getting paper statements or whatever it is, but you're kind of forced into that online world. So I'd like to hear the views of the panel just in terms of that carrot and stick approach in terms of transition.
Yeah, I think, we had these conversations early on, and it's amazing. Even some senior managers in their organisation will be stick, but I think what really works is, if you figure out what they want, you put it online, you make it available, you don't push, you see what you get in terms of conversion from that, even in terms of self-service, and then even growing in sales. And then once you'll hit a tipping point where you say, well, look, right now, we're having that debate now internally. It's to say, like, right, from the 4th of September, we will no longer take phone orders for our consumer products. So, and I would have all of the analysis and the data to back up that even like we've analysed that, for example, to the point of even of the remaining customers who for the last 6 months who have bought through our telesales department, over 70% of those have used online. So it's not a case of where you have this fear like, well, they just don't use the online platform, they don't buy on the online platform. They do. So now it's just a matter of like saying, well, I think we should do a bit of stick to modify that behaviour now.
And I think you can
but you need to be careful. You need to be really careful.
Yeah, so do you have online only discounts? What's the, because I hear the sugar, that's always good, but not everybody goes to, not everybody's attracted to that and offer for one reason or another. So
we haven't done anything in the way of like saying we'll incentivise them to go online. Like I think for business, like for us, our customer constantly talks about like being time poor. They want things really simply done for them. So we have a high level of confidence that we've done that now. We've achieved that. So now, and by that alone, we say like, right, we should be able to. Like, we're never going to turn around and say to a customer, you can't bring them to order a life-saving medication. That's just never going to happen. But for other areas of the business, we have an unlicensed medicine part of the business where we don't take any fun, and they're the exact same customers that are buying our consumer brands as well. Like, so it's a complicated relationship for us.
yeah, and have you found out anything about those that are due? So they're omni-channel. So today I'm ordering online versus those that are just the exact same. So we have customers that come to place an order online, but maybe a couple times a year they'll order the 527.
Yeah, what we found is like it's just behaviour. It's somebody else. It's this person orders online. This person prefers the phone in. It's down to that type of.
The other possibility is we need to look at their behaviour and how they function at their work as well. So if you're a chef and if you're tired 2 o'clock in the morning, it'll be very hard for him to go to a computer and make a long list of ordering. But if you give them a reorder tablet option, it might be a possibility that you might change the behaviour a little better. So we need to really understand what is their need, how do they function at the job they're doing, and just try to make it easier for them, and we have a good chance that they might adopt. So that's the kind of a carrot we need to
we did a tablet trial with customers as well, with those customers that were, so we gave tablets out to these customers and said, like, right now you can get out from behind your shop and walk around and just reorder what you want. And again, we had really mixed results. Like some of them absolutely loved it, like completely converted, and you'll still get some that are like, so it is behaviour.
Yeah.
Did you keep the tablets, or did you get them back?
No, we get it to them.
Yeah.
And I would say the same as internally, right? So we get a lot of questions again, how do we incentivize sales to push this, and how do we incentivize the stores to push the website? And
Yeah.
I would say it's the same there. I'd say the more of a carrot approach there, and make sure that if you've got sales, if you've got stores, incentivize them on online sales. Give them whatever way you want to do that. Give them postcodes and zip codes or air codes or whatever it is. Give them a range of them and say, any sales done in, if you're a pharmacy in D4 or whatever it is, you get paid on online sales that happen in D4, and suddenly, suddenly you've got
Buy-in, they're incentivized. 100%.
Yeah, now they're incentivized. So for internal, I would say stick is a little bit more difficult because you sometimes if you're part of the e-commerce department, you mightn't have that stick, but you definitely have the carrot to incentivize internally.
On that note, for branches it's easy to say, okay, you can have endless aisles, you can have other options, so we are driving traffic in.
Yeah.
For say sales rep on the ground, how do you tell them that their job is not in danger of going by the customer going into the branch or online?
Yeah, I mean that's very, very common, and I think if it's if it's a sales rep, account manager type role, their role shouldn't be taking orders. Well, that's at least in some industries that works. So their role is like manage the customer, manage the customer. So if they're managing the customer and they build a relationship with them, they can still be incentivized with orders that are placed online. That's the approach I would try. Again, that doesn't work for every business, but if the account manager does a good job, they find new customers. They get incentivized on the customers that they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Obviously, I don't know, depending on the business, if it's one big sale and that's it, it mightn't work perfectly that way. But definitely try and incentivize internally as much as you can to bring the internal teams into pushing the website as an ordering mechanism.
Yeah, and I think it's a good question, but you can also as well, you can incent, like if you get down the road of incentivizing those sales reps and saying, like, even says that coming through e-commerce, you're going to get your commission paid on it. Our sales team now are predominantly about winning new business, selling in new key concepts, new brands, business development, talking about holistically their overall margin and what we can do with that. Like, the last thing we would want is one of our sales reps going in and saying, can I take an order for you?
To do that, like, so in our case, the sales rep gets the same if it's their customer, doesn't matter what channel.
Same for us.
Yeah, so like, how are you actually incentivizing the salesperson to push the customer online in that scenario? They're not seeing the benefit necessarily, they're still slow. They're used to doing things for so many years. It's
a real challenge. Like, we found we've had a real challenge with it, and a lot of resistance on the sales team side to doing it. It's something for us. It's something that's taken time. It's definitely taken time. But now I'd be really confident that they completely endorse it and are very pro it.
What is the tipping point that when now they're...
I think the tipping point was actually just that our customers started to adopt. Like, I wouldn't have said like that they were overly pushing it, and then when they said the same to, oh yeah, look, they seem to like it, and then like a good salesperson will always, they understand, yeah, they like it, so now I'll evangelize it.
And I've seen businesses as well that would essentially give their sales reps tablets with the website on it, so when they're at the customer taking an order, they put the order in on the website anyway. So whatever system they're using today, if that's some kind of a CRM system or ordering system, that could be the website. So if they're using the website to place the orders, maybe even in front of the customer, that's one way to go about it as well.
They get credit for it.
Well, they would have access to where they all have tablets and they have access, but we don't. We consciously made the decision not to give them access where they could go in and place orders, because again we were fundamentally not wanting to go that route yet.
Yeah, we made that decision as well, where we don't want the rep placing an order on behalf of the customer online.
Okay.
So that's definitely not on the table, at least in the next 2 months.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, there's lots of reasons for decisions like that. Absolutely. Yeah.
That being said, in a similar role for ourselves, it would be in product information. So that sales rep mightn't raise the order, but they could get all the information to the customer as necessary.
Yep.
They use it as a search tool themselves.
Absolutely.
Ashley, the question.
Sorry, yeah. Magento, I think, came from a business to consumer platform,
Yep.
and then it's moved into
Yep.
business to business. The assumption is that people will log on to your website to place an order.
Yeah.
We're in the food services business, and more of our customers are using things like Procure Wizard, which is their own computer system, and they want to electronically, they don't want to log on to 40 different suppliers on
Sure.
their individual websites and do all their individual things. They want to log on to their own website
Yep.
and then spit out their order. Obviously, there's a trend towards that people want to communicate and trade electronically.
Yep.
But putting a huge platform in, spending a huge amount of development, and then find that everybody just wants to send you an electronic file and they don't want to go onto your website at all. How do you?
Sure, I mean, you know, if it's only that, and if all of the orders come through that, you know, there's probably little need for a full e-commerce platform. But if it's a mixed model, we've plenty of customers that would do an integration with something like a punch-out system or Procure to Pay or Ariba or something like that, where you know they use their own ERP systems to view a catalog that might be stored on Magento, and then they place an order on their own systems, send that order to, well, usually send that order and do the approvals process internally. Once it's approved, it goes into Magento. Whatever happens on your side then happens there, and it goes back, the updates flow back into the customer system to say yes, order received, order approved, order processed. So we can definitely do that. What we find is that usually there's not like one system, so there's multiple systems that you're integrating with then on the customer side. You know, there's probably not just the one, but it's definitely a model that we see on the B2B side quite frequently. And something you've picked up on, we did come from the B2C side very clearly. It was an interesting kind of shift that happened within Magento, and that's when about 4 years ago we started developing a B2B product. We launched it about 3 years ago. But just before, 2.5, just before we launched that, we had a report that came out from Internet Retailer, IR, a large organization that ranks sites globally in terms of revenue done. And they looked at the top 300 global B2B sites. And they look at a bunch of things, but one of the things they look at is the platform that they run on. And we didn't have a huge market share within that, but we still had twice the market share of the second biggest competitor. So even without trying, the flexibility of the platform allowed us to be a major player in the B2B industry. There was a lot of people that have just built their own stuff on top of an ERP, so they didn't come under any of the platforms. But yeah, we were twice the size of the second biggest ERP. I think we had about 40 or 50 of those 300 merchant, and the next platform competitor had about half of those. And we were just about to launch that B2B functionality. So that was even before we launched the B2B functionality. So, and really that report and that kind of realization that even though we were never really targeting that market made us double down on the efforts that we'd started at that time. So it's an interesting journey, but quite happy with where we are today.
Actually, coming to that, when we started, we decided that we're going to go for B2B. That's the market we wanted to be excited about. But those days, Magento didn't actually have any B2B features. So we built, for example, UniPhar we built on Magento 1, which is actually a pure B2C platform. It doesn't have any B2B. So then we custom coded a lot of B2B features. It's great. It's very flexible platform, so it was easy to code. But now what we realize is that after the B2B release in Magento 2.3, 2.0 onwards, it's just so much easier because all the things which we were coding and maintaining and using as from our point of view, it's all coming as a pre-built and it's very well maintained. So from our point of view, the life has just gone a lot easier to kind of provide the solution.
Okay. I'm conscious of time, so I'm just going to... Oh, one more question, sorry.
Ian, I have a question for you, I suppose, in terms of the overall... You described a very complex ecosystem.
Yeah.
And I suppose, you know, Marc alluded to the fact that most systems are going to do most of the stuff most of the time.
Yeah.
But clients are invariably going to want customization. And I'm just wondering, you know, as part of the overall life cycle of a B2B project, how do you assess the risk of people? Because traditional, like you mentioned support as one of your things. And I suppose internal resources
Yeah.
now have changed dramatically, because the IT resource that was going to stay for 30 years now becomes an e-commerce superstar who is more akin to a sales resource. So Paul, you take someone out of your call center, bring them into your e-commerce team, they suddenly can command from 30k to 70k in a 3-year period. They're far more portable, and they leave with an enormous amount of knowledge. And I'm just wondering, you know, in terms of the project planning and the overall picture, how do you factor knowledge management and the risk associated with the portability and migration of internal staff, or do you?
I don't know. I think you need to look at the kind, you know, as part of a business case for any of these investments, you need to look at the resources you're going to need, not just to put it in, but to support it. Like, you should be looking at 5 years or whatever it might be as your appraisal of it. I think the fact that they're portable may be a bonus as well, if you're trying to move, oftentimes trying to move away from a situation where you're dependent on a legacy skill set and technology, and you're building that risk. You know, whether they're going to leave, that's just a management challenge, isn't it, about how you incentivize them and look after them and all of that. From a systems perspective.
You know, so in terms of knowledge management, so you've got customization from, you know, maybe, you know, sucking in from 20 different EPOS systems. Then you've got your staff customization, you've got your PIM. So you've got all these disparate systems, and obviously Monsoon are going to know about everything they've done in Magento. But in terms of the ecosystem,
it's a good question. It's really down to documentation and training, I think, and that it's reusable. When we look at that very much in an ERP world, from business process training and so on, and the same applies. You know, people learn a lot in a project, they become your super users, they move on, and then you get the knowledge deficit creeping in again. So one of the things that we'd always say that shouldn't be underestimated is the training and the documentation, and doing it based on, in the ERP context, on your business processes. But I think the same will apply for the technical kind of resources and skills, that you document that and capture it, and, you know, whether it needs to go to e-learning or whether it's just well specified stuff, and keep it up to date then as you're going through. You know, naturally you're going to evolve it all the time, as Paul alluded to. You're always adding on bits, you're always evolving it, so keeping that in step and factoring it into all of the developments and extensions that you do, so that you're not just dependent on human knowledge.
I have a different view on that.
Okay.
Let's say you have a risk of obviously losing these really capable IT guys who has built a really complex system. Fair enough. But what if you don't do it? So then you have your critical dependency of your business nuance on these human beings who actually know a complex way of doing